Welcome to the 40th episode of the Perfectly Imperfect Spiritual Podcast. I'm Marta, and I'm so glad you're here. A few years ago, I began exploring my birth chart and realized the sun sign was just the tip of the iceberg. I delved into my rising sign, my moon sign, and eventually discovered the 12 astrological houses. Watching how each new moon and full moon illuminated a different part of life changed everything for me. The moon stopped being a distant light and it became a rhythm, a guide, and a mirror. And it was through that journey that I found the work of Yasmin Boland. And Jasmine is a best-selling astrologer and moonologist. She's written Moonology, Moonology Manifestation, the Moonology Diary, Astrology Made Easy, and created three incredible Moonology Oracle decks. Moonology Oracle decks, Moonology Manifestation Oracle, and Moonology Messages Oracle. Her work has helped countless people bring lunar wisdom into daily life in a deeply personal way. I am honored to welcome her today. Welcome to the podcast.
You just gave me an amazing idea, actually, Marta, so I'm just writing it down. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I'm really, really excited about this conversation.
Oh, me,
Um,
thank you.
I'm just curious because you began. I would like to start from the beginning, but there's never a beginning. But what has just popped into my mind, you began your creative journey in journalism in Tasmania and then like London, but astrology eventually began calling to you. Could you explain with the listeners, viewers, how did that invitation start and what was the first whisper that moved from story into deeper knowing?
So I think what happened was that, well, on some level, I feel like all the work that I did before I actually kind of invented Moonology or tapped into Moonology as a journalist, a writer, a TV producer, I feel like it was all just preparing me for what I do now, which is just only Moonology. And what actually happened was that I'd been a journalist for quite a few years. I grew up in Tasmania, Australia, like you said. I eventually went to Melbourne, what we call the mainland, and then from Melbourne I went up to Sydney for a while, and then came to London, and I love it here, and I've lived here for at least half my adult life. And here I worked as a journalist and a TV producer, but I actually had a job which some of your viewers might understand. It was a show that was out many, many years ago called The Word. And it was, sorry, I'm just going to close the door here. It was a very, very, very intense, difficult TV show. And afterwards, I thought I need some tools to handle that kind of stress because I didn't have them. And so that's when I learned to meditate. And it was basically in learning to meditate that everything changed. And that's how I became interested in astrology and more into meditation and into the law of attraction eventually and moonology and all that. So, really, long story short, I was a journalist and then I learned to meditate.
I love it. Well, could you now talk a little bit, or a lot, if you prefer, about your time in Paris? Because your time in Paris was so much more than a creative residence, and it felt like a full-on co-creation. You manifested the city, your home, and even your husband. So
Yeah,
could
I
you
did.
share
Yeah.
about that chapter of your life?
Okay. So, I'd always, I'd always not really wanted to get married. Actually, I'd never wanted to get married, and and then suddenly at a point in my life, I was in my 30s, and I just thought, you know what? I think I do want to find someone to share my life with, and I particularly felt the calling to have a child. And anyway, so what happened was I was living in Sydney. I went to Paris um, for a week, liked it, decided to stay. I'm a freelance writer. I was a freelance writer at the time. I was just starting to delve into astrology then, or I'd been studying it as a hobby, but I hadn't done it for work, I don't think. And so I just was able to sublet my apartment in Sydney, and I stayed in Paris. And Yeah, no, it was the most incredible mystical time I've ever had in my life. I basically knew one or two people when I got there, and not even didn't even know them very well. And I suppose in a way it gave me a sort of a little, what you could call like a sacred Parisian container to really do a lot of spiritual work. So I did a lot of meditation then. That's, I think, around about the time when I first went to the ashram in India I've been going to for about 20 years. And yes, eventually I met the man who would become my husband. And we, I think, in a way, we got together because I really had decided I wanted to have a child.
Mhm.
And yeah, and so I met Olivier, and we got married very fast, and we ended up getting pregnant about 6 months after I met him. So my
Mhm.
life just completely changed. I went from being this sort of crazy single girl, just with a backpack, to
Mhm.
suddenly I was living in Paris, to doing all this sort of magical work and sending out the call to meet someone who could come into my life. I remember one night going up to the Eiffel Tower actually and making my new moon wishes under the tower. It was a bit different back then. This was about 20 years ago, and now they've got all the hoardings around there because of all the problems that the world has had in the years since. But it used to be you could just walk off the street right up under the Eiffel Tower. And I walked in there on the night of the new moon, probably at the moment of the new moon, knowing me, and just made my wishes under the Eiffel Tower and sent them up. Um, because I figured that the shape of the tower and the spire and the fact that it was, such
Mhm.
a amazing monument would sort of send my wishes up into the universe, and they did. And yeah, so that happened, and it was amazing.
I love it. And you've mentioned about traveling to India. So could you now expand a little bit? Because I know you're known for blending lunar wisdom, including Celtic and Hindu traditions. And that's what I love about your book, that like you explain how to work with various moon phases, but then you incorporate archangels, then goddesses, and there's so much depth. So how did you come to these deep sources? And was it through travel, lineage study, a combination of everything, or just something your heart simply felt?
Yeah, it was a combination of things. I actually have a copy of the book on my desk, so I'll show you for anybody who doesn't know. It's called Moonology. That's the book that came out, I think, in 2016. And it's still an Amazon astrology bestseller. Like, so it's nearly, yeah, it's going to be 10 years next year. Um, and that was part of the whole India thing. So what happened was that, let me think. I mean, I've told this story so many times, and now I just have to remember where it all started. I was in a coffee shop in Sydney. I was living in Paris, but I was back in Sydney for the summer. I was having a coffee with a friend. I said, I don't know what to do. I don't have anywhere to live for 5 weeks because I had my flat in Bondi that I owned, but I had found tenants and they wanted to move in quickly. And I had sublet my apartment in Paris, and I had someone who was going to be there. So I had 5 weeks where I had nowhere to go. So I thought, you know what, maybe I'll go to India. And so I told my friend this over coffee. It was called Brown Sugar Coffee Shop in Brighton Boulevard in Bondi Beach. For anyone who knows it, I think it's now called Porch and Parlour or something. Anyway, this guy who I still know, a friend of mine, this guy, but at the time I didn't know him that well, Nadav Khan, who was quite well known around Bondi as a musician, he leaned over and said, "Hi, Yasmin." I'm like, "Oh, hi, Nadav. How are you? I didn't see you sitting there." It was like a communal table. He said, "Did you say you're going to India?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I'm going to go. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I'm going to do." And he said, "You should go and see Narayani Amma." And I'm like, "Who's Narayani Amma?" And he said, "Well, Amma's an avatar. Do you know what that is?" And it so happened I did know what an avatar is. An avatar is a god incarnate on the earth. And I'm like, "Yes, I know what an avatar is." He said, "Oh, well, look." And he wrote down a bit of information for me, an email address and stuff. He said, "Here, take this and go and see if you want to go there." I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I went and had a look on the website, and I was like, "Yeah, that looks kind of interesting." This Amma was a teacher, not the hugging mother. Okay, it's another Amma. And I thought, yeah, but I think I'm going to go to that yoga center that I reviewed for a travel website a couple of years earlier. I'm not sure about this. I don't know what to do. So literally the phone rings. I mean, I'm just trying to explain to you how, you can follow synchronicity, what Deepak Chopra actually called synchrodestiny. The phone rings and it's this girl called Sophia, which by the way means divine feminine wisdom. The name Sophia means divine feminine wisdom. And I'd met her once. She'd never called me before. She's never called me since. She called me. And I'd met her on a course. And she goes, "Hi, Yasmin, it's Sophia. How are you?" I said, "I'm fine. I'm just thinking about going to India. There's this yoga center over on the west coast, southern sort of round Trivandrum, called the whatever, blah, 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 that I went to." She said, "Oh, my God, don't go there." I'm like, "What?" She said, "Oh, no, it's terrible. Like no offense to Americans, but she said it's run by all these Americans. In other words, not by, I suppose, local Indian people. It's run by all these foreigners, let's say, and they just want your money." I'm like, "Oh, but I went there. It seemed fine." She said, "No, it's not. It's terrible. Don't go there. Go somewhere else." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So that was that. So then I rang up the airline to say, "Look, I'm going back to Paris via Sri Lanka, actually. And so I'm thinking I wouldn't mind popping over to India and, have a layover, whatever you call it." And they said, "Okay." And I said, "If I go to the West Coast, Trivandrum, where the yoga place was, how does that work?" She's like, "Oh, if you do that, you'll have to stay overnight in Colombo." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. And will you pay for the hotel?" And they're like, no, you'll have to pay for the hotel." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Because back in those days, I was living off the smell of an oily rag. And I was like, right, can't pay for a hotel. And I'm like, okay, fine. And I'm starting to think, I know where this is leading. This is leading to what Nadav was telling me in the cafe. So I'm like, okay. And what about if I fly into Chennai, knowing exactly what was going to happen? She's like, yes, that works perfectly. All the connections are great. And you can just, no problem. I'm like, okay, fine, I get it. So I booked that trip, and my intention was to go for 5 days of the 5 weeks. I thought, well, I'll go to this ashram that I'm supposedly meant to go to for 5 days. I ended up staying there for the entire 5 weeks that I was there, and my whole life was changed. Everything shifted for me there. It was 5 weeks at an Indian ashram set up in devotion to the Divine Mother. And it was just the most extraordinary experience. It was when I first encountered, really started to get to know the goddesses. I knew a little bit about the goddesses, but I learned so much more, particularly about the Sri Narayani goddesses. Narayani is made up of 3 goddesses: Lakshmi, who's the goddess of love and abundance; Saraswati, who is the goddess of divine feminine wisdom; and Durga, who's the goddess with the power to destroy ignorance. Anyway, so I had this amazing time, and it was from there that a lot of the information that ended up in Moonology came from, because I'm actually Irish Maltese, effectively. Like, if you break it down there, if I've never done my 23andMe DNA, but I'm pretty sure if I did, I'd be basically Irish Maltese. So Malta is a beautiful island off Italy. It's its own country. It used to be, anyway, it's its own country, but it's considered by many to be the home of the goddess. A lot of people actually think it was Atlantis. I don't know about that, but it's definitely got very, very strong goddess traditions there. And my other half of the family is Irish, which obviously has a lot of Celtic goddesses. So I've definitely got it in my blood. I had just never tapped into it. And so what I'd been doing in my practice with the moon up until that point was basically new moon stuff. So new moon manifesting, new moon intentions, new moon wishes, start again, and very much actually in the Celtic vein. So when I went to India, they do a little bit of new moon stuff, but really their focus was very much the ceremonies. They would do these massive full moon events, and about, like, at the time, it's probably more now, but like 10,000 people from all the surrounding villages would come into the ashram for the full moon event, and everybody would just like walk around the village. They'd be carrying sort of burning pyres, burning things, and it was just all massive. And so when I came to write the book Moonology, I knew exactly what I wanted to write for the new moon, because I'd already been doing that for probably 5 or more years, all my new moon practices. And I thought, I know what I want to write for the full moon. I want to incorporate what I've learned in India. And really, in India, what they teach is surrender. So surrender to the divine, let it all go, release it. And I had read about forgiveness many times. I was very interested in forgiveness, and I'd read about forgiveness and how it releases karma, and how when you forgive someone, you basically break the karma between you, and you it's sort of like cleansing. And I'd always thought in the back of my mind about, there's a quote. I hope I'm not talking in too many circles here. I'll stop in a minute.
No, I'm loving it.
But there was, when I was young, and when I was 14, living in Hobart, Tasmania, I read the New Testament of the Bible. And there's a section in there which had blown my mind. It's in the chapter of Mark. And it says basically, I tell you this, you can pray for anything, and if you believe you have it, it's yours. And so I read it again. Does it mean if you believe in God, then you have it? No. It doesn't say that. It says, if you believe you have what you're praying for, it's yours. And that blew my mind. That was when I was about 14, when it was the first time my mind opened to the idea of the law of attraction, that if you believe that you have something, it's yours. And that's in the Bible. But the next line is, but first you must forgive anyone against whom you have a grudge. So it was very important to me. That is basically what then led me to the full moon stuff, because what happens at full moon is that your emotions rise up. We all know that. Everybody knows that people go crazy at the full moon. And so what kind of formed in my head over the years before I wrote the book was the idea that, okay, so all our emotions come up. That means we can access them, we can process them. And that's the time to do the forgiveness work, because, you can pray for anything you want, and if you believe you have it, it's yours. But first you must forgive anyone against whom you have a grudge. And, I'm not particularly Christian or Catholic these days, just because I have trouble with the church, but I still sort of have a very big place in my heart for Christ and Christ's teachings, along with Mother Mary and, all the other angels and saints, and Lakshmi and Durga and Saraswati, all the whole team, Ganesha, Sandrama. Anyway, so really that's where the whole full moon forgiveness thing kind of bubbled up from, was partly my trip to India, plus sort of other things I'd read. So, I hope that answers the question. You said there's Celtic in there, there's Hindu in there, and that's how it all sort of came to be. Because what I realized, especially later on, a lot of this I just wrote instinctively. I feel like I just channeled it all. That's why this book is nearly 10 years old, and it's still in the Amazon, usually in the Amazon Astrology top 10 bestsellers, which is extraordinary for any book to stay 10 years in the bestseller. And I feel that happened because I do feel that I was just a sort of a conduit for it. And actually, there was one other story I wanted to tell you, because it is relevant to this question. What was so interesting was that when I was writing the book, I was in Sydney finishing it off, and I was just one night, I basically had a weird dream. I felt that I got a big download from my teacher in India, Sri Shakti Narayani Amma, the one whose ashram I've been going to all these years. And I literally stayed up all night. Admittedly, I had jet lag. So Sydney to London jet lag is pretty serious. But I stayed up all night, and I basically rewrote the book. And I believe that it was all part of the same thing. Like it was all just meant to be, and I tuned into it. And I would say, just to go back to where my journey started, I would say it all happened because I was meditating. And when you meditate, you do get connected, and you can get all these divine downloads. And I'm so sorry, I've just talked for about 10 minutes, but I hope that makes sense.
Oh, I love it. No, those are the most beautiful stories, and I'm sure viewers and listeners will be so happy to hear about it. You mentioned briefly today Deepak Chopra. I know it's been another transformative moment for you. Would you be able to talk about that conversation, and how did that moment maybe shifted something in your understanding of manifestation?
Yeah, so that's a little bit of a mystery how Deepak did it. But basically, in a nutshell, what happened was that I'd actually just had a breakup with a boyfriend. And I was feeling a little bit down in the dumps. I didn't really know what to do with myself. And I read that Deepak Chopra was coming to Sydney. And in fact, a fellow called Leon Naxon, who later became the Australian managing director of Hay House, he was bringing over I'm just looking on my shelf. I've actually got a picture. I'll show you.
Thank you.
I knew I had a picture somewhere. Leon was bringing Deepak Chopra, James Redfield, who wrote the Celestine Prophecies, Louise Hay. He was bringing them all. There I am. It was many years ago. This was 1999. Okay. And so I wrote to Leon. I said, and so I was still effectively a journalist. And I said, look, Leon, but I was already meditating. I was already interested. And I said, Leon, I'm a journalist. I meditate. I'm very much on the spiritual path. And I see you're bringing Deepak Chopra to Sydney. Is there any way I could I fly to America? Because I always am a big thinker. I mean, sometimes I just do these things without even thinking, and there's some magic in that, but it means you end up doing things that are a bit half-baked sometimes. But anyway, so what about if I fly to America and interview Deepak and James Redfield and Louise Hay ahead of their visit here? And he's like, and Leon's an amazing guy, so he immediately understood that this was a good idea. And not only did he say, yes, sure, I'll organise it for you, which meant I had no red tape to do. He just wrote to them all and said, okay, she's going to come and interview on this date, and they just agreed to be there. It wasn't like I had to then write all the letters saying, I'd love to interview you. Just made it all happen. And this was 1999, okay, so this was quite a few years ago. He gave me $1,000 spending money, which was just like, oh my God, it just suddenly meant, I could afford it, and I wasn't going to have to pay for it all. So I pre-sold all the interviews before I left. And all 3 interviews were amazing. Louise Hay, I interviewed her. She's who started Hay House. She was amazing. James Redfield, amazing. I interviewed him in Birmingham, Alabama. I interviewed Louise Hay in her house in La Jolla. And but Deepak was the one that really kind of shifted something in me. And I always say to people, one of the best illustrations I can give you of how it shifted things for me was that in the following year, my income quadrupled. And I always felt it was that Deepak somehow rewired my brain. So I've heard people like Sonia Choquette, for those people who know Sonia Choquette, she's a Hay House author. She's amazing and she's a friend of mine. I've heard her say that she can work on people and kind of rewire their brain. I also have a friend, Laura Day, they call her the Wall Street Psychic. She's just been on Oprah and Good Morning America and all sorts with her new book called The Prism. She also says that she can rewire people's brains. And I think Deepak Chopra rewired my brain. And I don't exactly know what he did, but remember I told you I was there because I just had this very difficult breakup. So I was kind of in a relatively low energy state. I mean, it wasn't a huge relationship, but it was a little bit, I was really upset at the time. And honestly, now I can barely even remember which boyfriend it was. But I and so I went in there quite vulnerable. And he and I talked a lot about synchrodestiny, which I mentioned today. He also weirdly, at the end of our interview, gave me a goddess book, which was really funny because at the time I was not into goddesses particularly. And I sort of thought, oh, well, that's a miss because Deepak's given me this random goddess book and I was really into astrology, but I hadn't actually discovered goddesses, which would become so important to me. So in fact, it was extremely intuitive of him to give me that and part of my journey. But I don't know what it was that he did, but I had 3 hours one-on-one with him, just interviewing him. I was trying to get, I think, 2 or 3 articles out of the one interview, which is why he gave me all that time. So it was just me and Deepak in his office. He was just wearing, I remember, this sort of basic grey T-shirt and a pair of jeans and socks, no shoes, in his office. And it wasn't a formal thing at all. He was very relaxed. I remember one thing he said to me. He said, when I look at you, I don't see Yasmin, I see just a bundle of consciousness in front of me. He said things like that. And I don't know what it was. I don't know how he did it, but I feel that that interview, that 3-hour interview, he rewired my brain somehow. He rewired me to believe in myself. He rewired me for abundance. And somehow it changed my life. Even though I was there to interview him, somehow he did something to me. I've never been able to explain it. But like I said, it was 1999. So that's now more than a quarter of a century ago. And I still am absolutely convinced that was part of the timeline, as much as going to India was, as much as meditating was. He did something. And I'll just say this as well. I remember before I went to interview him, a friend of mine who I love and who I'm still in touch with, but she said, Deepak Chopra, I'm not really sure about him. He's just all about money. Did you know that when he flies from LA to Sydney for his events, he flies private with a piano on board because he likes to play piano, and he has a grand piano on his jet. And I mean, I don't even know if that's true or not. So I kind of went in there a little bit thinking, who is this guy? What's he actually like? And I came out thinking, yeah, well, he does that because he wants to, because he believes in abundance. And and not that anyone has to justify what they do with their millions, but I do know he does a lot of charity. And at the time he was doing something which I very much took on board, which was once a week he did free sessions at his center in La Jolla, where any man and his dog could come in and have a free meditation and discussion with him. And I thought, well, okay, well, maybe he does fly to Australia with a grand piano on a private jet. I don't know. I've never heard that, but that's what she said. He also, every Wednesday night, opens the doors of his center to anybody who wants to come in and just learn how to meditate, get some free wisdom, completely free, and probably gave them food and drinks as well. So, I think the fact that I wasn't cynical about people like that really helped me as well. But yeah, so I mean, I don't know I don't know if it really adds anything to the conversation about Moonology, but it definitely, I think, explains how the success came about, because I was able to tap into his wisdom and his ability to, really get out there. And I mean, obviously his penetration in the world is probably 1,000 times greater than mine, but he did something to me, and I definitely still credit him.
Thank you for that. And part of the magic of your work is weaving spiritual insights with grounded tools. And one influence that stands out to me so much is Florence Scovel-Shinn. When did you first encounter her message, and what in her teachings influenced your direction? I'm very curious.
Right, yeah, no, Florence Scovel-Shinn is amazing for anyone who doesn't know her. So she was a 19th century metaphysician, and she wrote a book. She wrote quite a few books, actually, but the first one that I read was recommended to me by a girlfriend who gave me a copy around about the same time that I was learning to meditate. So around about, 96, 97 probably. And she gave me this book and said, she said, I buy this for everybody. I buy this for all my good friends who are, spiritually inclined. And funny, I mentioned that because I ended up doing that as well. I must have given that book to 50 or 100 people over the years. So I took it and I read it. And I said before, I'm not that Christian. So Florence Scovel-Shinn is quite Christian, and it did grate with me a bit, because I think as I moved from my Catholic upbringing into being more, spiritual, say, I sort of rejected a lot of the Christianity stuff for a while, and now I've kind of made peace with it, via the Christ light and Christ consciousness, say. So she's quite religious, but don't let that put you off, because what she does is she teaches about, one of her books is actually called Your Word is Your Wand. Okay. That I think maybe was her second book. I'm pretty sure her first book, which was the one I read first, is called The Game of Life and How to Play It. And so she talks about how we create our world with our words and our thoughts. And so one of the things that people will know of her work, even if they don't realize it came from Florence Scovel Shinn, was when you are wanting to manifest something. I believe this was her actually. Now I've got a doubt, but I think it was her. This or something better now manifests for me under grace in perfect ways. So whenever for example, if you read my book Moonology and you're doing the new moon manifesting, it's always this or something better now manifests for me under grace in perfect ways. It's like a insurance policy. And for anyone who's struggling financially, she has a really good little affirmation, which I'll give you. And Deepak Chopra gave me an affirmation as well. And I think now I think of it, that was a huge thing. So he told me, come up with an affirmation for what you want to create and just say it as you walk around everywhere. When you're walking down the street, when you're crossing the road, when you're in the bath, when you're doing whatever, just keep saying this affirmation, which I did. I made one up and I kept saying it. So I think that was another reason how I rewired my brain. And, neuroscience supports that if you can believe it, you can achieve it, basically. And so for anyone who's struggling financially, a little affirmation for you, which is, I give wonderful work in a wonderful way. I give wonderful service for wonderful pay. So it's a really good way to increase your abundance. So her book, The Game of Life and How to Play It, was definitely a massive thing on my journey because it taught me about the law of attraction, and how your word is your wand. And so you need to sort of, I started saying to people at that point, when they said, what do you do? I used to kind of go, oh, well, I'm kind of a journalist, but I'm doing astrology. I don't know. And then I went from that to, I run a thriving astrology business, So like, it's just about, and then, the first 5 times you say it, you feel like a twit, but then you start to say it and then it starts to happen. And then you start to say it and, then you actually say, you're just saying the truth. I'll just give you 2 other recommendations for really good books if you're at the start of your journey.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, Creative Visualization by Shakti Gawain really helped me and influenced me. In fact, really was seminal for me. Seth Speaks, which was by Jane Roberts, which was a channeled entity, I suppose you'd say, who taught about all this stuff. Also, actually, The Law of Attraction by Jerry and Esther Hicks, which in a way was like, there was Seth Speaks, and then, I don't know, 10, 20 years later, there was The Law of Attraction by Abraham Hicks. They're very similar, but different. Also, for people who are into the whole new moon thing, obviously my book, Moonology, but also there was a beautiful book that helped me as well, New Moon Astrology by Jan Spiller. And there was one other that I wanted to mention. Unfortunately, I can't remember the name of it, but if you look it up, if you and maybe I can give you this list after, but it was by another entity that's sort of been channeled, Sanaya Roman, and it's a book that is, I can't remember what it's called. You could find it though if you look it up. It's sort of got what would I call it? Like a fractal image on the cover, which is all sort of pinks and purples with a tiny bit of gold in it. We can look it up. But anyway, so many books which help me. So as you can hear, it's all just been a big journey. Along the way, I learned more about witchcraft, which I'm not particularly into, to be honest, but I understood the concepts basically of the idea of, sending your wishes out to the universe or casting spells, if that's how you want to do it. Wayne Dyer, Wishes Fulfilled, so many books that really helped teach me about manifestation. And I'm just going to say, Marta, I think that where we are now is that everybody's learned this basic stuff. Like, you almost don't need to read all these books because you probably understood it just by your Instagram feed or your Facebook feed or YouTube feed, because now all this knowledge has really been, inculcated by the world population. And that astrologically works with the fact that we've had Neptune and Saturn in Pisces, which Pisces is the very mystical sign. And so having Saturn and Neptune in there, I think really helped everybody to understand what all the concepts are. And I think you'll agree, most people will agree in the last, say, 12 to 18 months, there's been more and more information coming through via neuroscience about why all these things that all these mystics have been teaching, including people like me and Deepak Chopra and Abraham Hicks and, Seth and all this, the neuroscience is sort of now catching up, because I think there are some neuroscientists out there who have jumped on the woo-woo train, so to speak, but are able to explain it with science about why it works. And it comes down to something called the reticular activating system or something, which I don't pretend to understand. But basically it's, set an intention, proper intention, and your brain will start to do everything it can to make that intention manifest. And forgive, because if you don't forgive, you're going to be a mess of turmoil and tumultuous emotions, and you're not going to be able to have a decent life. So the more I've read about neuroscience, the more I've realized why my Moonology methods work.
Thank you. We are recording this episode in June 2025, and I'm wondering, would you be able maybe to talk about this coming full moon in Sagittarius and then the new moon in Cancer as an example, so we can, so that anyone who's new to astrology would learn about what you teach we should do during full moon, what we should do during new moon, and why those signs are important. And yes,
sure.
maybe
I'm just looking for my diary, because I've got it all written up in there, and I don't have to open up the chart. Hang on a second. Keep leaving your camera. So a lot of people actually don't know about my book Moonology. They know about these. This is the Moonology diary. So this is the diary for this year. I've actually just got a copy of the one for next year. Can I show it to you?
Yes, please.
So that's the one for next year. But that's the one for this year. So I do an analysis and interpretations of all the new moons and full moons in here ahead of time. So saves me having to open it and try and work it all out. So where are we? It's going to be the full moon on June. Let me just quickly find it. Okay, so we've just had the new moon in Gemini. It's going to be the full moon in Sagittarius is going to be, okay, June 11. All right. Will this go out before June 11?
Yes, I'll do my best. Yes, yeah, it will.
All right, full moon in Sagittarius. So it's all here. Say something kind, don't fight what is, decide to heal, see the funny side. So full moons are always intense, and this one is going to be no exception, because it's clashing with the karmic lunar nodes. The way to get ahead of any potentially aggravating energies is to be as kind as you can. So if you're listening, that's a message, regardless of who you're dealing with. In a world that often feels tumultuous and overwhelming, a few well-placed kind words can go a very long way. This full moon takes place just ahead of a lovely Mercury-Venus alignment, so tune into the power of being thoughtful. So basically, with every new and full moon, every full moon, you want to do the forgiveness work, okay? So, even if you don't even know which sign the full moon is in, just think, oh my gosh, full moon, who do I need to forgive? Do I need to forgive myself? Do I need to forgive someone else? If something really difficult happens, sometimes you need to forgive them a few times. It might be a few full moons in a row. Things happen that are very, very hard to handle. And, I've been through very tough times in my life since I've been doing all this. I've had an amazing time, but I've also had, difficulties. And I can say, hand on heart, it's the Moonology practice of forgiveness at full moon, and then when we get to the new moon in Cancer in 2 weeks after that, setting intentions. It just changes your life, because even if you can only forgive someone, like you do your full moon practice. I do a Facebook Live every single full moon, usually with a fire in my courtyard, because that's one of the things I learned in India. They use the yagam, the fire ceremonies, which kind of, I think, transmutes the energy. So you put any of your problems, upsets, disappointments, resentment, anything you need to forgive, release, let go, put it in the fire, it gets transmuted. And, there is something so powerful. So even if you can only forgive someone for 1 millisecond, just the fact that you have slightly forgiven someone or forgiven them for a second is a step in the right direction, because trying to keep it more to the science, now that the science has sort of started to catch up with the woo-woo. The woo-woo was always sort of, if you forgive someone, you're going to have clearer energy, and then when it comes to the new moon, you're going to be better at sending your wishes out to the universe, because what you put out is what you get back. That's kind of like the woo-woo version. But the neuroscience basically backs that up. The neuroscience that's come out now backs it up and basically says, if you can forgive, you can move on. For example, if you can move on, then you're not stuck in the past. And if you're not stuck in the past, you're in the present. And it's in the present that we create the future. Neuroscience basically agrees with Moonology, thankfully. It's not woo-woo. It actually is science as well for people who are more left brain than right brain. I'm a bit of both. Being an ex-journalist, I'm delighted that neuroscience backs all this up. So bottom line, full moon, forgiveness. New moon, intentions.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, in your book, anyone who is really drawn to working with the moon, you explain how we can work with other phases of the moon. So it's not only full moon and new moon, we can always do something in between as well. I think it's important.
Yeah.
To add
So,
that.
I mean, I think with the, in fact, it's in Moonology at the back. Like when I first started to work with the moon, so it would have been in the mid-90s, I used to work with the moon every single day because I wanted to get to know it. I wanted to feel it. I would make notes. I'd do journals. I'd do little drawings and so on. And you can, tune in every day. In fact, in the diary, we tell you which sign the moon is in every day and what phase it's in. Because when you're first starting to work with the moon, you can kind of become a bit obsessive and you want to do that daily stuff. And that's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you absolutely have to, like, I think having done this now for a quarter of a century, if you are clear on your intentions once a month and you do forgiveness work once a month, you are already streets ahead of people who are not doing that. If you want to add in another thing, quarter moons, that's when the moon looks like a half moon. So a bit like that one there. So when the moon looks like a half moon, which it does halfway from the new moon to the full moon and halfway from the full moon to the new moon, do some gratitude, okay? Gratitude is so important. And we are actually doing a new version of an updated version of the Moonology book. And because it's 10 years now. What we have put in there is a bit about the gratitude, because I didn't put it in there the first time around because I'd just been experimenting with it, but it's really important. It's half moon. What am I grateful for? It just, Deepak Chopra actually told me, gets you out of your ego. Gratitude gets you out of your ego. And then when you get out of your ego, you can start manifesting.
Thank you. Do you have any of your beautiful oracle decks with you? I'm curious whether you would be able, towards the end of our conversation, to pull a card and if it's in alignment with you.
Yeah, I'd love to. I've got my manifestation deck here, my Moonology manifestation deck. And I was actually just thinking yesterday, because my first deck, the Moonology Oracle cards, as far as I know, it's still the deck that sold the most out of my 3 decks. And they actually became the best-selling cards in the world for some time. And then they became the best-selling Oracle cards in the history of Oracle cards. And I was thinking about that yesterday, and I was thinking about this deck and how I haven't really ever told people about it, because the other deck kind of gets all the attention because it became so incredibly successful. And it's really an amazing deck, because what you do, so do this now. I've picked a card. I'll put it down for now. I haven't looked at it. It's completely random. But what this deck does is it asks you, what are you trying to manifest? Okay. And then, okay, it tells you, This is how you're going with it. So this is what you need to know about how well it's going or how well it's not going. And this is what you need to do to manifest it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm going to ask you to do, Miss Marta, and
Mm-hmm.
also everybody who's listening, and I will do it too, is I don't know if you have comments usually under your videos, but if you do have comments, you can write in the comments. I'm going to write it on a piece of paper, and you please do this as well if you want to. You don't have to. But what is this card about? Okay, we don't know what it is yet. What's the card about? And I'm going to say mine's about, I have a particular question I have, so it's about that. And so it's going to tell me, how is that looking? Am I manifesting it yet or not? And if not, what do I need to do to boost my manifesting? All right, so if you've done that, oh, goodness. All right, are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
So we actually got the full moon in Leo card, go wild. All right, so let's see what that means. Full moon in Leo comes up such a lot in all my decks. Okay, so, oh, all right. Are you ready for your answer? You asked a question?
Yes.
There are times when your best bet in manifesting and in life is to just throw all your cards up in the air, so to speak, to see how they fall. As tempting as it might be to try and control a situation, you'll be better off now if you just release and go wild. You'll get an answer to your question soon, so you might as well enjoy the ride. The unexpected thing is that having fun is one of the most powerful ways of manifesting your desires. Distance yourself from anyone who's ignorant. So find a balance between having a great time and attending to all the people who need you. So worrying about something or someone triggers the law of attraction as much as positive thoughts. So focus on the positive and have some fun. Go wild. Okay. So I know what that means for me. I think I've been, the question I'm asking about, I've been obsessing about it. Here I am asking about it again. So for me, what this card is saying is just relax, Yasmin, just enjoy. Whatever's meant to be will be. Get out there, stop worrying and have some fun, and then see where the cards fall. Does that speak to you a little bit, Marta?
Absolutely. I can fully relate to it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, if you would like to augment that with a little bit of a ritual, because they've always got a ritual, or it could be to do with crystals or angels or goddesses. Okay, so if you have an essential oil diffuser, add some cinnamon to your diffuser, or just get some cinnamon and, put it in your coffee. Sip your coffee or put the oil in your diffuser, rest in a comfortable position, and call in the goddess Medusa. So, Medusa, the once wild and beautiful goddess whose decapitation symbolizes the end of the matriarchy and the start of the patriarchy. Feel Medusa's power and step into your own feminine power. And I have a manifestation. So, if we do what Deepak says, we repeat it all the time. I live in the present and released all past pain. I live in the present and release all past pain. All right, so you can do the little ritual, cinnamon oil in your diffuser or a bit of cinnamon in your coffee, call in Medusa with the intention to step into your feminine power. I live in the present and I release all past pain. And a particularly good time to do that is when the moon is in Leo, or on a Sunday, which is the sun's day, and Leo is ruled by the sun. So there you go. Does that help?
I'm sure it does. Well, it definitely does help me, and I'm sure so many viewers, listeners are going to relate as well. And finally, Jasmine, where can people find you and how they can work with you?
Right. So I'm on the internet, far and wide, left and right, up and down. Yasminboland.com. Facebook is my preferred social media because I do Facebook. I think that demographic. If you put Yasmin Boland Moonology in there, you'll find me. I also have an Instagram page. I do like Instagram as well, but I'm really a Facebook girl, which is Planet Yasmin Boland. You'll find me everywhere. I'm all over the shop.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you so much for your light, your presence, your grounded lunar wisdom. I truly believe that you've definitely reminded me, and I'm sure everyone else, that astrology isn't just intellectual, it's lived, it's felt, and it's deeply human. I truly appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Marta.
And goodbye to all of the viewers and listeners. Thank you. Bye-bye.